Hi guys. Whenever I explain any sort of ideas, I usually like including examples taken from very classical games. And here's another one. This time we're going to take a look at Tarrasch against Chigorin. So from our current perspective, you could say this is just ancient times. People, did they even know how to play chess? Well, they did, and in fact, I would like to show you a couple of interesting attacking ideas taken from that ancient game. Let's see how the dinosaurs of chess played. So there was e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5, a6. We have the classical Ruy Lopez, bishop a4, knight f6, knight c3. This is not the move that we see very often nowadays. You could find this move being played at club level, at beginner's level, but we sort of prefer to play a move like kingside castle, or perhaps even d3, which is the modern approach to great many Ruy Lopez setups. But back in the days, people liked developing their pieces first, and it's hard to blame Tarrasch, Dr. Siegbert Tarrasch, for playing such a logical move. Black went bishop b4, and now Tarrasch occupied this d5 spot with the knight. Again, an idea which is often used even at the highest level nowadays. The main point is that, of course, just tactically speaking, knight takes e4 will never work because of bishop takes c6, pawn takes c6, it doesn't matter which one, and at the end of the day, knight takes b4, white is just up a healthy piece, and black just has no compensation whatsoever. So everything seems okay tactically. If you still have any sort of doubts, then just make sure you consult the PGN that is presented in the on my blog post. But black replied with bishop a5, which is an understandable move. It is important to keep the bishop on the board. Kingside castle, b5, bishop b3. So this resembles the way we play Ruy Lopez nowadays, although maybe there's a slight difference. The bishop does not really belong to this diagonal. It should have been placed on a7 g1 diagonal so that it could control the d4 square, perhaps prevent white from playing d4 himself. Black went to d6. There was d3, which is again a logical move, preparing the bishop to jump to g5 and completing the development. Black went bishop g4, which is again more than natural. After all, it is developing the bishop on this very active position, pinning the knight on f3, and actually preparing a nasty knight d4 jump with immense pressure on the knight on f3. And Tarrasch realized what's going to happen in a moment, and therefore he played c3. And what Chigorin played right now, and you need to understand that Chigorin was one of these players who never went back. He was always playing for the result, trying to win, not only to win, just to crush the opponent. He was considered to be playing according to the so-called romantic chess school, so he didn't really care about his king safety. He wanted to make sure that his opponent's king is checkmated first. So in this position he went knight e7, which is an interesting idea, and I understand that this was supposed to tempt white into playing a move like knight takes f6, and after g takes f6, I can imagine Chigorin being very optimistic about the idea of playing rook g8, putting the rook on this g file in order to attack on the white king in the future, possibly with the use of bishop h3, and if the bishop jumps there, there is again some sort of unpleasant pressure on white's position. And I can also imagine black being able to bring some other resources in a moment. Please remember that if the position in the center is closed, it is justified to expose your king safety, to weaken your pawn structure from the king side in order to attack your opponent's king. So from that perspective, Chigorin's idea is actually quite interesting, but what he missed here, and this is the key position of this entire game, and this is what I would like to draw your special attention to, is that you can never take anything for granted in chess, and you always need to calculate pretty much at any move just to make sure you're not missing something. Either you're not missing something that you blundered, or that you're not missing that your opponent made a mistake. So in this particular position, what Chigorin missed and what Tarrasch fantastically took advantage of was already the weakness of the black king. You might be wondering, how would you even be able to get access to the black king? After all, it's so nicely secured by those knights. Well, and here comes the surprise. Knight takes e5. In fact, you could play this combination in a slightly different move order, and again, make sure you take a look at the notes that are in the post I have on my blog. The main tactical concept here is that after bishop takes d1, there comes a fantastic checkmate idea, that after knight takes f6, g takes f6, there's bishop takes f7, and on king f8, this bishop comes out of nowhere and gives a checkmate. So two bishops really cover all of the squares necessary, and this beautifully positioned knight on e5 safeguards the bishop on f7, and this trio just seals the deal. So, as a matter of fact, Chigorin was presented with a very difficult task, and he just had to face the music, and he went d takes e5, admitting that this was just a mistake. He went for a bad plan, and he dropped a pawn here. And knight takes f6, g takes f6, queen takes g4. So as you see, black's pawn structure on kingside is already compromised, but it's not the end of the world for him. And black can still, black of course has a worse position, but it's not the end of the game, so white still needs to perform. There was knight g6, bishop d5, hitting the rook on a8, and this is a very smart idea presented by Tarrasch. Whenever you're attacking, make sure, and whenever you're attacking the king in the center, perhaps I should make this disclaimer here, whenever you're doing that, make sure you don't allow your opponent's king to escape, and in particular to castle, because then he's going to put his king into safety and your entire effort is going to be wasted. So bishop d5, hitting the rook, and black is pretty much forced to escape with the rook, and of course then we know that queenside castle is never going to happen, and kingside castle, let's be honest, well, that just looks ridiculous. So white plays f4, keeping the initiative and opening the position. If you recall this piece of advice from my previous posts, from other articles of attacking properly the king in the center, then you f4, you're not surprised with this move. What white is trying to do is to open the position in the center so that other pieces, especially this nice rook, which was hidden behind its own pawn, well, this rook is a really happy piece here. Some fresh air is breathed into this piece. So f4, intending f takes e5, opening the f file, and then white can really enjoy this attack. c6 was played, which is a bit of a bait here, really, because after bishop takes c6, black just went king e7. So it's really hard to understand at the very beginning what Chigorin was trying to do with his fancy pawn sacrifice. But when you take a look at this position and think for a little, then you realize that this is just a plain trap, and queen b6 is a way to win this bishop. So of course Tarrasch paid attention to this move, and he didn't really just think that black blundered the pawn, nothing of the sort. He realized that he needs to play precisely, and he went bishop d5. b4, f takes e5. At this point, you don't really care about the fact that black is attacking on queen side. This is not dangerous at all. So f takes e5, it's basically a race. Whoever manages to crash through opponent's position is going to be is going to be the winner. So queen b6 was played, king h1, simply sidestepping the check, knight takes e5, the knight gets centralized, but it's basically the only move that was available to black, just f takes e5, loses on spot after rook takes f7. Well, a couple of moves could still be played, but I don't imagine black being able to hold on for more than 2 moves. Leave a comment if you see a defense for black here at this point. There's well, you can leave a comment anyway, but this was just to make point that there is no defense here. Knight takes e5 was played, and white went queen h5, which is again a very logical move. What you're supposed to do when you're attacking is to create constant pressure on the opponent, and as you see here, 2 white's pieces are hitting the pawn on f7, which is very close to the black king, so black really needs to pay attention to that. And of course d4 is another threat. Black went knight g6, and this is another key moment of this game. We have another important situation. White needs to find a way to break through black's position, and he does that in style. Rook takes f6. And the point is relatively simple. When we consider queen takes f6, then just bishop g5 pins the queen, and white wins a lot of material. Instead, black went king takes f6 in the game. And this was met with, well, a beautiful sequence of moves, a beautiful sequence of checks and other attacking moves. Bishop g5 first, king g7, queen h6 check, king g8. Just take a look at this poor rook on h8. It's really useless there, and white knows that. Rook f1, invite all of your friends to the party. Now bishop takes f7 is not a joke at all. It's going to be checkmate if that happens, and if that doesn't happen, or if black defends, well, Tarrasch still had a backup option, or maybe this was just his main option and he saw that in advance. And I'm sure you've heard that if you manage to coordinate your bishop and the queen in an effective way, for instance like this, then often it's even impossible to defend against a checkmate idea like that. So after bishop f6, in order to prevent checkmate, black pretty much had to sacrifice his queen, and the resulting position is obviously just winning pretty much in every single line. And at this point Chigorin actually resigned, but if we could just make one more move, pretty much any move, b takes c3. I just wanted to show you quite a beautiful end of this game, which didn't really happen. If b takes c3 was played, white had a really amazing option at his disposal. Rook takes g6, h takes g6, and queen takes g6, taking advantage of the fact that this f7 pawn is pinned and black cannot take the queen. And this is a unique imprisonment of the king, which is, as far as I remember, it's called the epaulette checkmate. You can Google it if you're not sure what that means. But basically the black king is restricted by his own 2 rooks, and this is quite a picturesque situation. I hope you enjoyed this game, and again, make sure you take a look at these annotations I've made, and in case there are some things you wish to discuss, feel free to drop a comment below the post. Thanks for watching.